Pop icon Claude Francois, often hailed as the French Elvis, met a gruesome end in 1978 when he tried to fix a flickering light bulb while standing in a bathtub filled with water. The 39-year-old received a severe electric shock that immediately fried his internal organs and stopped his heart. A family preparing to bury a loved one was shocked to find that one of the burial plots they had purchased was already occupied. Despite extensive efforts, no one could determine who the mystery individual was or how they ended up buried there. Rather than exhume the remains, the family decided to let the unknown person rest in peace, marking the grave with a headstone that simply read "Random Person." In the 1960s, the CIA was looking for creative ways to spy on the Russians without being noticed. That's when they came up with the genius idea to use a cat to record Russian conversations. A veterinary surgeon implanted a microphone in the cat's ear and a radio transmitter at the base of its skull. The plan was for the cat to be released near a Soviet embassy and innocuously record any dialogue amongst the men. But after 5 years of research and $20 million in funding, the cat was struck and killed by a taxicab almost immediately. While filming Jackass No. 2, Johnny Knoxville attempted a motocross backflip that went horribly wrong when the bike crashed down handlebars first directly onto his crotch. Knoxville was immediately rushed to the hospital, where doctors discovered the trauma had torn his urethra and partially detached it from his bladder. For the next 3 years, he had to perform painful self-catheterization twice daily to keep the torn tissue from sealing shut. He later described the sensation of pushing a tube through the raw, unhealed tissue as like jamming a knife into an open wound every single day. The risk of infection was constant, and any mistake could have led to permanent urinary dysfunction or worse. In 2018, Demi Lovato was found unconscious in her Los Angeles home after ingesting a mix of heroin laced with fentanyl. Her assistant discovered her unresponsive and thought she was already dead since her skin had turned blue. Paramedics administered Narcan to save her life, but what followed was far worse than most people realize. Lovato suffered 3 strokes, a heart attack, and severe brain damage due to a prolonged lack of oxygen from the overdose. She was legally blind for several days and still has blind spots in her vision which affect her ability to drive. She had developed organ failure and placed on dialysis as doctors told her she was only minutes away from death. Even after surviving, her motor skills were severely damaged and she had to relearn how to walk. Demi later admitted that she had asked her dealer for heroin but was instead given fentanyl without her knowledge. Lovato has since spoken openly about the trauma, referring to the near-death experience as the biggest wake-up call of her life. Photographer Sam Davis captured the incredible moment a snake eel burst out from a heron's stomach while the bird was still flying, having chewed its way through the heron's throat using its pointed tail. Both animals were likely fatally injured. In the 90s, Disney planned to open a theme park called Disney's America near the Civil War battlefields in Virginia. A Disney executive said the park would let visitors feel what it was like to be a slave. Amid intense public outrage and political pressure, Disney ended up scrapping the disastrous project. Actor Daniel Hovels accidentally slit his own throat on stage during a 2008 theatrical performance after his prop knife was somehow switched out for a real one. The audience initially thought it was all just an elaborate special effect. The blade had just barely missed Hovels' carotid artery, but he was back on stage the next day. The leading cause of death for pregnant and postpartum women in America is homicide. This is often driven by partner violence that is escalated or triggered by the pregnancy, stemming from jealousy, fear of responsibility, and financial stress. In 2014, a crematorium in Virginia caught fire during the cremation of a 500-pound body. The excessive body fat caused the furnace to overheat, igniting the building's roof. A Florida musician known as Prince Midnight constructed a fully functional electric guitar he dubbed the Skelecaster, using the skeletal remains of his deceased Uncle Philip. Philip had donated his skeleton to a medical college in Greece, but after 2 decades, the school no longer had any use for them, so the remains were returned to his family. Prince Midnight decided to honor his uncle, who introduced him to heavy metal music, by turning his ribcage, spinal column, and pelvis into a guitar. In 2012, a freak accident saved this woman's life in the craziest way possible. 42-year-old Donna Barber was at a family gathering in Arkansas when her teenage son accidentally shot her straight in the neck with a bow and arrow. The arrow pierced the side of her throat just inches from her carotid artery, close enough that she could feel her pulse pounding against the shaft. For a moment, Dawn remained standing in shock before collapsing in a pool of her own blood. As her family screamed in panic, some believing they just witnessed her death, she was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. But during emergency scans, doctors made a chilling discovery. Nestled deep in her neck, not far from the arrow's path, was a cancerous tumor growing in her thyroid. It hadn't caused any symptoms yet, and without the arrow, it likely would have gone unnoticed until it was far too late. Surgeons carefully removed the arrow then the tumor in a single surgery, and Dawn miraculously went on to make a full recovery. In 2002, New York City bartender Sean Doyle was out drinking with his friend Michael Wright when a drunken argument suddenly broke out after Wright accused Doyle of flirting with his girlfriend. In a fit of rage, Wright threw Doyle down an open manhole and he immediately started screaming in agony from below. The shaft led down to a steam tunnel where a ruptured vent had caused the water temperature to reach an estimated 300 degrees Fahrenheit. Doyle survived the fall and was pleading for help while trapped in the boiling water, but the heat and steam were far too intense for rescuers to reach him. Witnesses reported hearing his screams echoing through the streets like a whistling tea kettle, then abruptly stopping. His body was finally recovered 4 hours later, and the medical examiner later described the scene as one of the worst she'd ever seen. The metal of his belt buckle had partially fused with his pelvis, and steam had filled up his lungs until they completely ruptured. His skin had completely peeled away, and his organs were essentially steamed like a lobster. Here's a 2021 photo of Alec Baldwin breaking down in tears after firing a prop gun that killed the director of photography on the movie set of Rust. The tragic incident happened as a result of catastrophic failures in safety procedures on the set. The woman who was responsible for checking the firearms was only 24 years old and had very little experience in her role. Rust was her second film as lead armorer since she had previously worked on another Western film called The Old Way, where she received multiple safety complaints from the cast and crew. She also admitted on a podcast that she felt overwhelmed and underprepared for her job on Rust. The live round that killed Helena Hutchins and injured Joel Souza was not supposed to be on the set at all. The production had a very strict rule that banned any live ammunition on the premises, and only blanks or dummy rounds could be used. But it was later revealed that some of the crew members used the same guns for target practice with live rounds during their off hours, and had failed to properly clean and inspect the weapons before returning them to the armory. After being told he would die if he didn't change his habits, a morbidly obese Scottish man went an entire year without eating any food. The 450-pound 27-year-old only consumed multivitamins and potassium tablets for 382 days, only going number 2 once every 40 to 50 days. He set a record for the longest fast ever recorded and ended up losing 275 pounds. French chemist Antoine Lavoisier wanted to perform one last experiment before he was executed in 1792. He told his colleague he would try to blink as long as possible after being beheaded by a guillotine. Some sources say he continued to blink for up to 10 seconds afterwards. In 1989, Canadian hockey player Duncan McPherson completely vanished at an Austrian ski resort. 14 years later, in 2003, his mangled body and snowboard were found in the ice on the mountain, showing severe injuries consistent with machinery impact. Investigators concluded that he was accidentally run over by a snowcat and buried in a small gap, where his body remained hidden for more than a decade until the glacier started to melt. In 2021, zipline instructor Joaquin Romero tragically fell to his death after sacrificing himself for a customer. Realizing the zipline couldn't support both of their weights, he released himself to save the client. A poor spider that was posthumously named Lawrence got stuck in this glass and couldn't climb up the smooth surface. So it apparently tried to web its way to the top until its silk ran out and it eventually perished. In 2020, Russian influencer Yekaterina Didenko's 29th birthday celebration at a Moscow pool complex turned tragic when approximately 55 pounds of dry ice were poured into the swimming pool. Intended to create a fog effect, the dry ice produced a massive amount of carbon dioxide gas upon making contact with the water, leading to suffocation and chemical burns among attendees. 3 people ended up dying as a result, including Didenko's husband, who succumbed to his injuries in the hospital. Juana Barraza, known as the Little Old Lady Killer, was a Mexican professional wrestler who murdered at least 16 elderly women in Mexico City between 1998 and 2006. She posed as a social worker to gain access to her victims' homes, then strangled them, often with cords or her bare hands, and stole their belongings. Her strength and wrestling background, performing under the name the Lady of Silence, made her attacks especially brutal. Panic gripped the city as authorities struggled to solve the case until she was finally caught fleeing a murder scene. Barraza later confessed to deep resentment toward her abusive mother and was sentenced to 759 years in prison. Vlad the Impaler earned his name through the methodical terror he inflicted on his enemies. When the mighty Ottoman Empire invaded his territory in 1462, they were met with a nightmarish sight: a forest of 20,000 impaled corpses mounted on tall wooden stakes and left to rot beneath the scorching summer sun. The victims, captured soldiers, peasants, and anyone who defied Vlad, were arranged with chilling precision, their decomposing bodies spreading a stench of death for miles. Upon seeing this grotesque display, Sultan Mehmed II was so disturbed that he ordered his army of 100,000 men to retreat. Actor Gaten Matarazzo, who plays Dustin in Stranger Things, was born with a rare genetic condition called cleidocranial dysplasia, affecting the development of bones and teeth. The condition left him without collarbones, caused severe dental issues, and required multiple painful surgeries. He was initially rejected from acting roles due to his appearance and speech, as his future in entertainment looked quite grim until Stranger Things incorporated his condition into the character. In more severe cases, CCD can lead to skull malformations, fragile bones, and life-threatening complications. Gaten now uses his platform to raise awareness and support others living with the condition. Nanny Doss was a seemingly sweet, smiling woman who murdered at least 11 members of her own family between the 1920s and 50s. Her victims included 4 husbands, her own mother, 2 sisters, 2 grandsons, and a mother-in-law, most of whom died mysteriously in their sleep or after sudden bouts of illness. Doss used arsenic-laced foods, poisoned drinks, and other subtle methods to kill, often collecting the insurance money of the victims after murdering them. When she was finally arrested in 1954, she giggled through her confessions, earning her the nickname the Giggling Granny. During a live firing demonstration in 1942, a Royal Air Force pilot accidentally opened fire on a crowd of spectators. 25 British soldiers were killed, while another 71 were wounded after being mistaken for dummies. After his floppy trouser snake was torn off in a car accident when he was 6 years old, 43-year-old Mohammed Abad received a fully functional bionic 8-inch pecker. It was constructed over a 3-year period using skin grafts, and is complete with a mechanical interior and a fluid pouch to give him erections at the press of a button. According to the surgeons involved, its function is still complete enough for Abad to be able to father a child with his still intact right nut. From the 70s to the 90s, more than 20 people were killed by postal workers in at least 40 separate incidents. It happened so frequently that going postal became a slang term for becoming exceptionally angry. This was referenced in the 1996 Jumanji movie when the hunter goes to a sporting goods store to replace his gun, and the salesman asks him, "You don't work for the post office, do you?" This is one of the worst cases of Munchausen syndrome by proxy ever seen by doctors. For years, Kelly Ronahan was thought to be suffering from a mysterious illness that caused her to frequently lose blood and required weekly transfusions. But once doctors started catching on that Kelly was likely draining her own blood to appear anemic, she moved on to a new health issue. She allegedly started picking at her legs, putting chemicals on them, and rubbing all sorts of substances and dirt into the wounds. Soon enough, her legs got so bad that Kelly needed a muscle transplant and skin grafts to cover up the holes. After being discharged from the hospital, she continued picking at the scabs and causing further damage, eventually turning parts of her legs black. It got to the point where she nearly died from sepsis and required both of her legs to be amputated. Kelly gleefully documented her whole medical journey on social media, posting hundreds of photos and videos of her progress over the years. But in the end, she reportedly did it all for internet sympathy. Serial killer Dennis Rader used to install security systems for homeowners. Many of his clients wanted the security systems to keep the BTK killer from ever entering their homes, unaware that he was in fact the one installing them. In 2017, Glenna Durham killed her husband after shooting him 5 times. Soon afterwards, the couple's pet African gray parrot started repeating the words "don't effing shoot" in the husband's voice. These were assumed to be the husband's last words, and the woman was eventually found guilty of first-degree murder. A French woman was scammed out of 830,000 euros after falling for an elaborate scheme involving an AI-generated version of Brad Pitt. It began in 2023 when someone posing as Pitt's mother contacted her online, followed by Brad himself claiming he was battling kidney cancer and desperately needed financial help or else he was gonna die. He sent AI-generated hospital photos showing himself bruised and hooked up to machines. Over time, the woman was manipulated into believing they were in a secret relationship, one he swore had to be kept quiet because of restrictive Hollywood contracts. She even believed they were engaged and that he planned to move to France to marry her. She wired him thousands for fake medical bills and customs fees for luxury gifts that he sent her but never arrived. After her husband divorced her over the delusion, she sent the scammers 775,000 euros she received from the settlement. Despite repeated warnings, she insisted it was true love until she eventually realized she had thrown her entire life away for a fake person. These are the hands of Japanese serial killer Tsutomu Miyazaki. He was born with a rare birth defect that caused his hand joints to be fused together, preventing him from being able to bend his wrists upwards. Two Mice Eating Cheese is the name of London's smallest statue, which commemorates two construction workers who died in 1862. They were scuffling over a missing sandwich that resulted in both of them falling off the scaffolding. Turns out it was just stolen by mice. The movie Jaws directly contributed to a surge in shark hunting and a massive drop in shark populations. Author Peter Benchley deeply regretted writing Jaws, saying, "Knowing what I know now, I could never write that book today. Sharks don't target human beings, and they certainly don't hold grudges." Today, sharks kill only around 10 humans per year, but humans kill around 11,000 sharks every hour. A 34-year-old man with ALS completely lost the ability to move anything, including his eyes. When a brain chip finally allowed him to communicate again, the first thing he said was, "I need a beer." Italian man Marco Mariolini earned the nickname Anorexic Hunter due to his disturbing fixation towards emaciated women. But he wasn't simply drawn to women who were already thin. He wanted to actively shape them into emaciation by pushing their bodies to extreme levels of malnutrition. He made his wife starve herself, making her lose more than 70 pounds until he eventually broke up with her once he got her pregnant. Marco then started dating a woman named Monica, whom he would punch in the stomach if she ate anything he considered excessive. He would even take her to nice restaurants where he would eat in front of her while she was forced to starve. One day Monica had enough and attacked him with a hammer before later turning herself in, only to end up facing house arrest with her monstrous partner. Marco would end up fatally stabbing her 22 times in retribution, and only spent a few years in prison before being released in 2021. After just one date with him in 2018, Arizona woman Jacqueline Adis allegedly sent a man over 159,000 texts over a 10-month span. Some of the texts were incredibly disturbing threats like, "I'd make sushi out of your kidneys and chopsticks out of your hand bones. I'd wear your fascia in the top of your skull and your hands and feet." Adis was later arrested for trespassing inside the man's home while he was out of the country, but she was later declared mentally incompetent to stand trial and the charges were dropped. This is the 2,000-year-old skull of Mary Magdalene on display at St. Maximin Basilica in France. It's considered to be one of the most precious relics in all of Christendom. In 2008, 19-year-old Brandon Swanson drove his car into a ditch while driving home from a party. He called his parents and told them he was fine, but wasn't sure exactly where he was. Nearly 50 minutes into the call, he suddenly yelled, "Oh shit," and then went silent. He's never been seen nor heard from again. Here's an 1870 photo of an Indian guru wearing an iron collar so he could never lay down. He did this by choice as a sign of devotion to his religion, believing that suffering allows one to grow closer to the spiritual. In 2019, Fred Pepperman swam out to rescue his 3 daughters who were caught in a riptide on a Florida beach. After saving them all, he fell unconscious and passed away on the way to the hospital. His final words to them were, "I got you."